This episode of Primitive Culture is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and to help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm.
And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org.
And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
This is Tim Russ, Lieutenant Commander Tuvok on Star Trek Voyager, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Open your mind to the past. All this may mean something.
I've been coerced into watching tonight's movie.
You do have books in the 24th century.
It's a primitive culture. I'm just trying to blend in.
Some people think the future means the end of history. We haven't run out of history quite yet.
Hello and welcome to Primitive Culture, a Trek FM podcast all about our history, our culture and how Star Trek relates to it. I'm Duncan Barrett and I'm here today at the Hilton Hotel in Birmingham, just across the road from the National Exhibition Centre where the big Star Trek convention is going on this weekend. And I'm joined by, I think, the largest group we've ever had for a recording of Primitive Culture. Rather than me try and introduce all my guests, I'm just going to go around the circle and everyone can introduce themselves. Some of them are familiar voices from Trek FM and from Primitive Culture. Others may be guests that we haven't had before and that we're delighted to have with us today.
Hi, it's Tony Robinson from Continuing Mission and Melodic Treks. Hello.
Hi, it's Rob Chapman. I'm at Trekkie Rob on Twitter and I run a Star Trek book club.
Hi, it's Rick Everson. I'm at TrekFanRick on Twitter and I'm on the 10 Backward podcast.
Lee Hutchison, sometimes special guest on Primitive Culture. Not special guest, but
it's always
recurring
special.
guest.
Always special when you're a guest, Lee.
Hi, I'm Cara Cook and I'm another host of Primitive Culture.
And this is Tony Black, formerly a host on Primitive Culture before I was relieved of command by Captain Jellicoe.
This is a very special occasion, actually, to get the three of us recording together.
Yeah.
It's like Primitive Culture is Core8 or something. When all three of us are in the room together, that's a rare event. But it's great to have both of you, with me, and great to have everyone else with me as well today. The topic we're going to talk about is it might sound like a slightly obscure one, but I'm going to try and explain it. It's weekly rep, or as I think of it in the context of this episode, Trekly Rep. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is a few years ago I read an interview with Patrick Stewart, and unfortunately I haven't been able to find this interview, this weekend. If anyone out there can find it and can send me the link, point me towards the actual original, I'd love to read it again. But basically what he said, someone was asking him, what was it like working on Star Trek? And he said, well, for me, it was quite a familiar experience because as a young actor at the start of my career, I'd kind of cut my teeth on weekly rep. And for anyone who isn't familiar with the concept of weekly rep, I don't know if they have it in the States in the same way, but certainly in the UK and certainly back kind of in the day when Patrick Stewart would have been starting out, it's much less common these days because of the kind of economics of theatre and so on. But young actors, the first jobs that they would get coming out of drama school would nearly always be with one of these weekly repertory companies somewhere around the country. And what it would be is they'd audition a load of people, they would get a company together for the season, and within that company they'd have a kind of spread. So they would have the young actors, they'd have the kind of romantic leads and so on. They'd have probably an old guy, they'd have, these sort of almost these kind of archetypal casting brackets in a sense. And between that company they would know that they could cover the parts in kind of a very broad smattering of plays. And then week by week, the actors they'd be performing one play in the evening and then rehearsing in the daytime for the play they were going to perform the following week. So it was a good kind of proving ground in a way for young actors because they get to try out loads of different roles. They get to kind of really push themselves. And they get used to the idea of, okay, this week I might be playing a Nobel Prize winning scientist. Next week I'm playing a reanimated rabbit, or whatever it is. That probably you didn't get so much when Patrick Stewart was coming up. But you might be doing Shakespeare, for example. It's a different Shakespeare play every week or whatever. And I just thought it was really interesting, this idea that we know Patrick Stewart, of course, was a theatre actor. We know a lot of Star Trek actors actually come from that theatre background. And this idea that Star Trek, because it's so varied week by week, sort of has that similar quality. And particularly what you get in Star Trek, which I think is quite unusual, is you get these episodes where the same actors are literally playing different people. So the kind of real... I think the kind of high watermark of that for me would be the episode Far Beyond the Stars, which very much, if you took out the kind of sort of wraparound bits with Sisko on Deep Space Nine, is almost like a play in its own right that's been written for this existing cast. And, you get these great actors and you give them different roles, kind of meaty roles, and they throw themselves into it. So I'm just kind of curious, what other episodes for the rest of you kind of stand out in that kind of Trekly rep category that, and what does it mean really when we have these kind of familiar actors not playing the role that they're listed as in the credits, but actually playing someone else?
Right. You've thrown me because I was like in the middle of taking a picture.
Tony was busy
I'm
tweeting, texting.
Somebody else go.
I think the most obvious one to go to is probably Far Beyond the Stars, probably considered one of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine and in general, is that this is someone where they immediately fall into different characters. Some of them are kind of police officers, some of them are newspaper editors, journalists, a person working in a shop. They immediately can fit into that and then back to their normal kind of roots the next week and stuff. And I think that's such a great one where it shows, and I think it's the fact that it's sort of a retro kind of historical vibe as well, kind of takes you into that kind of mindset of you need to be all of these things to work in this kind of environment.
And you get that interesting twist, I think, in that episode as well, that you get René Aubergenois kind of playing almost the villain of the piece, and Armin Shimmerman playing this really kind of passionate advocate of kind of civil rights and kind of a progressive outlook, which obviously is so different from his character normally in DS9. And, those two in particular, I think everyone does a great job in that episode, but those two in particular, it's always fascinating to watch, partly to see them without the makeup, but also just to see them playing characters that are very different from the characters that we kind of expect from them.
Would the Killing Game count as
definitely.
Yeah, you've got pretty much the whole crew taking on World War II roles, which is quite interesting. So Janeway I suppose the crew is the Resistance and the French Resistance and
the GIs as well.
Chakotay
and Paris is the kind of gung-ho GIs.
Jerry Ryan singing as well. You have to be a
club.
A jack of all trades, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for an episode like that to work, you need someone like Kate Mulgrew who can't just play Captain Janeway. She can play this kind of nightclub owner, and she's doing that on probably like a couple of days with the script to kind of think about it and get into this new character and completely sell that character as a kind of distinct person. And I suppose maybe that's one of the things, maybe one of the reasons that Star Trek has often cast theatre actors is they do need people who can kind of do that kind of work. I mean, when we were talking yesterday, we were interviewing Jeffrey Combs and we were asking, how do you differentiate all the different roles that you play? And you definitely got the sense with him, the reason they kept hiring him again and again was they knew he would come in, he'd look at the script, he'd create a new character that wasn't just what he'd done before, and they could kind of rely on him to do that.
I suppose the only difference between Far Beyond the Stars and Killing Game is the obvious difference is that all those characters, although they're taking on different roles, they're still in there. Neelix still has all his gear, and Seven still has a bit, so they're not completely taking on new roles. But
it is almost like their sort of personality has been suppressed and replaced by this other personality in a sense.
One of the best ones, and I'm lucky that you've been very prepared, Duncan, and you've written down possible episodes.
Tony's looking over my shoulder.
This
is how Clara and I spent our lunch hour.
It's good. It's good. One of the ones you've got on there is Armand Bashir, which is a good example of one where, for most of them, their personalities are completely consumed by something else. Obviously, all the Bond villain tropes and the Bond girl tropes, and you've got Nana Vista and Kira doing Major Mary's Kira and all that stuff.
And she's fantastic.
And she's brilliant. And then Avery Brooks should really play a Bond villain anyway. She's so good as that kind of powerful Dr. Noah. And then, of course, it's Bashir who's himself and Garak who's playing himself. But apart from that, you really get part of the reason that episode's so good and works so well, and I think that's one of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine for me, is because you believe that these characters they're playing are these archetypes, these tropes, and they love it. They have such a great time. The actors clearly love having a day off from their normal parts and playing these characters.
So whenever you see interviews as well with these people, like what was your favourite episode, or tell us a great time? It's always like, always the episodes where it wasn't them on the
It's
bridge.
the weird one.
It wasn't them on the Paramount set. It was like,
True.
you know, we were off set here, we were doing like James Bond that day. Anytime that they could, because you think of like 170 odd episodes in this thing, pretty much the similar stage every day, you know, on the bridge sets. Anything to get away from that, anything to be different, always stands out to them. And because I'm sure, like, I always think of it when they get asked, what was your favourite episode? Oh, it was that one that was like that. I can't remember the name of the episode, the title. But if it was something a bit different, oh yeah, Armand Bashir, it was rejoined or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the episode where they go to a planet and there's a trade conference and then one of them gets, has a conversation with it. It's like, no, it's not that one. It's the one where they end up like, or for Patrick Stewart, it's the one where he's basically John McClane.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Gets to do something different.
Yeah.
Which is true. And I mean, you could say that, action movie Picard, which you kind of get in that episode and you kind of get in the movies, is almost playing a different character to Jean-Luc Picard. And certainly like in First Contact, there's that bit. I always found it very jarring, actually. When he comes out, he and Lily have gone into the holodeck, he's done the Dixon Hill, and then he comes out and he says to her, "We've got to get to the bridge," and he does it in an American accent, and it's like it's a really strange moment because you're like, that's not Captain Picard. Are you still playing Dixon Hill? What the hell's going on here? And there's that kind of he's getting almost. I think by the time you get to the movies, he's playing Dixon Hill as if he kind of really wants to be Dixon Hill. When you watch like the Big Goodbye, Patrick Stewart is playing Picard, hopelessly bad at playing Dixon Hill. Do you know what I mean? So there's this kind of question of when are they acting? When are they aware of it? Because in The Killing Game, they're not acting. They are unaware. Their minds have been wiped. So they think they are that person. But you see, I don't know if it's always clear, because then in something like Bride of Chaotica, we're supposed to believe that Janeway is playing Queen Arachnia. And I don't know, I don't see much of Janeway in that. I see Kate Mulgrew having a great time playing Queen Arachnia. Do you know what I mean? You sort of buy that Janeway, aside from all her many talents, is a brilliant actress in a way that Picard is not a good actor.
Do you know what it probably is that, think of it like the beginning of Next Generation, like The Big Goodbye. The holodeck is brand new technology, you don't really kind of probably know what to do in that environment. Do you just sort of play yourself, kind of hang around in these spaces? So by the time you get to see something like Killing Game, Bride of Chaotica, it's second nature to these people. They've grown up with it. It's been technology for decades in their life. They get to just a natural mindset that we'll play something a bit different. We'll really embrace the kind of the role, whereas perhaps it's a novelty factor at that kind of early stage.
I think it could as well be that, in a way, all the characters they play on Star Trek, I think when you a lot of them, when you listen to the actor speak, there is a lot of them when they put into these parts. Especially someone like Kate Mulgrew. You really when you listen to Janeway and then you see her playing other roles, you can see the same kind of traits that she performs the same way she does it. So maybe that's why we don't always get the feeling that it's Janeway playing Chaotica as opposed to Kate Mulgrew playing Chaotica. So there's that, because there's always that little blend. In a way, I think the best actors are the ones who almost put themselves and their own mannerisms into the characters they play. It sounds like it would be the opposite, but I don't think it is. I think you really believe the character because you believe that there's a naturalism to it. I think that's what it is.
But there can be a kind of pleasure to doing it badly, almost, in a way, because like I love A Fistful of Data. That's one of my favourite sort of guilty pleasure Next Gen episodes. And I actually particularly love Marina Sirtis in that episode. And loads of people have said to me, her accent's terrible. What the hell is she doing? This is such a weird episode. But she just seems, like you were saying, she seems to be having so much fun. And you actually can't tell, is it Marina Sirtis having fun or is it Deanna Troi having fun? But I almost don't care.
That's what you mean.
It's like there's just so much pleasure in it because it is different. It's very different from Councillor Troi, who's quite sort of calm and measured and serious.
It's both of them having fun, I think.
Yeah.
I was thinking Hollow Pursuits as well, because we've got examples that the crew have their own personalities suppressed and play someone else against their will almost, or they go in there and play something for the fun or for the need. Hollow Pursuits is someone else's interpretation of them, and they get to play another character's idea of what they are like to different extremes in Hollow Pursuits, because we have Barclay's 10 Forward simulation where he gets to be the tough guy, or we have the really extreme version with the goddess of empathy. So it's kind of like a whole different...
And then kind of pathetic Riker as well, like this sort of ridiculous version of Riker.
Yes, the short, enthusiastic one waving his sword about.
Yeah.
But you also then get Barclay in two different versions. You get him as he wants to be, playing himself on the holodeck, and then you get his real world persona. So he kind of has his own double performance in that as well.
Which is a really interesting way to introduce that character, I think. I mean, I've always thought it's strange that the first time we see Berkeley, he's not really Berkeley. Do you know what I mean? I mean, he is Berkeley, but like he's playing this, he's acting, he's playing this role, this fantasy, basically. We get to know him through his fantasy of who he wants to be rather than who he really is somehow. And I think that's a very surprising way of introducing a character in some ways, but almost by showing you what they're not.
It's also that weird situation in some of the episodes where the actors are actually playing ancestors of their characters. Mm-hmm. Like T'Pol is playing one of her ancestors, or isn't there an episode where Janeway? And they're sort of, it's weird because their ancestors almost seem exactly like them, you know, and like they're just playing a version of themselves in a different time period, except it's not really them; it's some sort of distant ancestor.
I feel like with Kate Mulgrew, actually, in that episode, she does play it. I know what you mean. She like it is very obvious. She's not Jeffrey Combs disappearing into the role, if you know what I mean. I feel like she does play it differently. She's not quite. It's hard to put your finger on, but she's not quite Janeway somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know whether with a Vulcan character it's harder because so much of T'Pol is this kind of mannerism anyway, and that is a kind of Vulcan mannerism, and it's almost like that would be even more of a challenge, like play two different Vulcans and make them seem like different people, you know. And even Jeffrey Combs hasn't had to do that, as far as I know. I don't think he's ever had to play two. He hasn't played two Andorians. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose with Star Trek, you get all this stuff from the species that you're playing that kind of feeds into the personality, because, you know, if you're a Klingon, you're probably quite angry and tough and like, you know, brawling around. And if you're a Vulcan, you're probably very cool and logical and so on. And that must kind of impact the individual characterization as well somehow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But isn't there, just going back to Jeffrey Combs, isn't there a theory that he does play Weyoun slightly differently the second time with the second Weyoun? Because the first Weyoun gets killed, doesn't he? I can't remember the episode. Season 5, maybe?
To the death.
To the death, okay.
His neck snapped, doesn't it?
And then, season 4.
Vaporized.
Yeah, that's right. But then
gets his neck snapped in season 7.
Okay.
That's it, right.
He does eventually.
He dies like 3 or 4.
Well,
he plays a few Weyouns, doesn't he?
You've
That's
got the
an
one
interesting
in
point.
Treachery for Faith and
the Great River.
It's clearly very different.
Yeah, you get one of them just
warm and caring and
so that's interesting, isn't it? That whether that was a creative decision on the part of the writers or it was Jeffrey Combs taking that material and going, right, I'm going to play this character, you know. Yeah, he's still going to be a bad guy, but I'm going to inflect it with different, like you say, one of them could be warmer, one of them is evil. You know, it's just, that's a really interesting way. I mean, the benefit of playing a clone is that you have the freedom to do that. But he could have just played Weyoun the same. And he brings more to the character in that it's not, and that gets you into the question of clones and souls and are they the same? But, you know, the idea is that Weyoun may be a clone and the same clone, but he's not the same person.
I suppose it's the situations that he's put into. Like the first time, first clone, he's, you know, they're hunting down these Jem'Hadar, so he's a bit more annoyed. Second one, he's in that proper, what I think they call the Vorter, sometimes the salesman of the galaxy.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, yeah, we can be your friend. Oh, Captain, you're wonderful. And, you know, even when they're about to go to war, he's still kind of turning on that charm. We see the other one, you know, he's a proper kind of leading of the war, really.
So maybe it is the writing then,
yeah,
as much as the acting. I don't know.
I think very much. I probably think of the situation these clones are dropped into. That she popped out, but the personality is always going to be slightly different to what situation that they're getting kind of parachuted into, really.
But they're kind of subtle differences. I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? They're not playing. It's not quite Cisco playing the villain in the Bond. Do you know what I mean? They're not like big, larger than life kind of characters. They're not kind of big differences like that. They're not even like. I thought, Clara, you were going to say about the episodes we see where the characters, actually like in Hollow Pursuits, have been misconstrued. So say in Voyager, you've got Living Witness, you've got Author, both stories in which one way or another you get these kind of distorted versions of these characters behaving in ways that are quite unlike them. And part of the sort of pleasure of those episodes is seeing Janeway as this kind of scary, you know, evil kind of Captain Janeway, and seeing everyone with this kind of darker side. And of course we get that again in the Mirror episodes, because I mean, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking the kind of episodes that come to mind for this, you get quite a lot from TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise and Discovery. I couldn't think of, until Clara said, there is that episode where T'Pol plays her ancestor. But again, as you say, she plays it very similar. I don't feel like those series have as much fun with this idea of giving the actors something different to do, except when they go to the Mirror Universe. And the Mirror Universe is kind of this license to play it all differently, to reinvent your character, to look at this kind of alternate
That's
version.
maybe where it comes back to technology, that in the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, you have the holodeck, and the holodeck can always be used for all these different things, even sort of the one where they're the evil versions of themselves. It's a holographic version that the Doctor's written. It's a holographic version that this planet has, that, hey, this is Voyager from hundreds of years ago. This is like, it's maybe not a technology that's around in Enterprise, apart from that pregnancy episode of the trip. And then Discovery, where they can sort of maybe be a bit free with it, like, right, you're in Ireland, you are Dr. Bashir as James Bond sort of thing. That's not there, so they maybe don't have the license to be so creative.
But what's the interesting thing about this is when I watched episodes on the holodeck, and I know that these are actors acting parts, right? So acting is their profession, acting is something they enjoy, they've chosen to do it as a profession. But when you think about the characters, we're talking about people who are scientists, who are people who, been in the military, we're talking about, navigators, pilots. I just question how much they would enjoy going into the holodeck and pretending. Now, and in our lives as individuals, we might read, obviously when you're a little kid, so you're kind of using your imagination when you read or you watch television. When you're doing a podcast, you're using your mind and imagination. When you go to a convention, you dress up as a character, but we're not all going to the convention and acting to each other like we're all members of Starfleet. Like, I'm not greeting Duncan and being like, Captain Barrett.
Sadly,
if only.
Brilliant.
Had a good point, associate producer.
Yeah. I'm not pretending that I don't know Duncan as a person. I'm saying, oh my God, it's an alien. So, and if you're not an actual actor, as you can tell, I'm not, then I don't know, it just always seemed weird to me that they're so willing that in their spare time to go into the holodeck and pretend with each other. It's a little bit like they're kids. Do you know what I mean? Pretending.
Well, I suppose it's true, but there is that episode where Beverly is trying to get Picard to be in her play, and he's like, "Oh no, I'm not much of an actor. I don't want to be in the play or whatever." And then she offers him the part of the butler, and he sort of looks slightly annoyed. Right? He's like, "Well, if I was going to be in the play, at least I could have been given a decent part." Yeah. But I don't know. Yes, I suppose that is true. Like, realistically, certainly in terms of the onboard theatre, if you took a random group of people, would you be able to rope everyone into the theatre? Although, I have to say, and sorry, I have promised in the past to stop banging on about this subject, but in the Channel Islands during the Second World War, 2% of the population of Guernsey ended up in the amateur dramatics companies, which is quite a much larger percentage than you would normally expect in the population. And that's because there was nothing else to do. And on a starship, there's nothing else to do. And I do think the idea of I'm not an actor, I'm not going to do any acting or whatever, or I'm not going to engage in this game, I'm not going to pretend this person someone that they aren't, is partly because we're embarrassed by all of that. And I think actually a lot of people, they want permission to be able to kind of play those games like their kids. If you go to Secret Cinema, if you go to a Punch Drunk show, any of these kind of immersive theatre experiences, basically, where you do get to dress up, and it's not just you dress up in your cosplay and that's what you're doing. It's a whole kind of world that is built around you, like the holodeck. People love it, and they're not all actors going along to these things or people who want to be doing Amdram or whatever. They're just ordinary people, but for that one night, they get to pretend to be someone else. They get to have this kind of amazing adventure they wouldn't have had. So I sort of wonder whether actually there is this kind of untapped potential in people for that kind of play. Maybe in Starfleet they're better at because they've got the holodeck, at kind of teasing that out, teasing out that kind of playfulness.
I always think of I know it sounds bizarre, but I remember going to a shooting range in America, which is something completely alien to us here in the UK. You can never imagine going off, shooting off some rounds. When I was there, had the gun in my hand, a target thing to play. I was sitting there thinking, I really want to pretend like I'm John McClane and say some of the lines and stuff. And I think when you're put in an alien environment like that, you find that sort of creative side of you comes out. You feel you can be a bit different. It's not your usual kind of environment. And I can imagine being in an environment where I'm pretending to be James Bond. If I had some of the props, I'd feel like swaggering around and there's no one else there to kind of perhaps tell you otherwise.
I think you'd find that it would be very popular in the sense of, I don't know if any of you have read or seen the film Ready Player One. But in the book there is, and it's not, I think it might be in the film, but in the book it's talked about how the technology has advanced that films now essentially become almost like a game that you, instead of just watching a movie, you say the lines along with the movie and you're in it. You're in a virtual space. So you choose your favourite film, whether it's, Star Trek, the Wrath of Khan, and you're playing Kirk, but you're sitting there watching the TV, but you're saying the lines, you're immersed in the world. The holodeck is sort of the advancement of that, really, isn't it? And it's that whole idea. I thought in Ready Player One, I thought that idea would so take off. Imagine having a Netflix, but a Netflix where you put a chip in your head, or you put some glasses on, and you're like in the film saying the lines and getting the satisfaction of being, like Lee said, the one that says, "Make my day, punk," that kind of thing, right? And then you get some gratification from that. With the holodeck, because like you said, it's the escape, it's the fantasy element. They haven't got anything else on that ship, essentially, which is also something I find hard to believe, because surely by then they'd have found other ways to entertain themselves. But yeah, I think there's the fantasy element, and I think the role play aspect, I think they were a lot less embarrassed by it in the 23rd, 24th century. Now everyone would be a bit, but I think as time went on, you would find that would change.
Although in Our Man Bashir is really not happy that Garak is there initially. He's like, this is my...
That it's his.
This is mine.
Yeah.
And it is like...
That's
there
true.
is that level of embarrassment. And all the way through, Garak is slightly teasing them about it, and the fact that because Our Man Bashir is clearly like this sort of male...
It's a wish fulfillment,
where he gets to fire the guns, he gets all the women kind of throwing themselves at him. It is sort of ridiculous.
Isn't that life as well? Like, think of it now that, we have our public personas, and then there's like online avatars on whether it's games, Twitter, social media, where people can say hateful things, lovely things, they can confess feelings they have for an opposite sex in a safe space, and when maybe perhaps someone goes in that they know where it's like, your mum was following you, that immediately explodes that idea of like, I thought this was somewhere safe that I could be who I am.
True. You saying Garak is Bashir's mum in that?
I think he is a man of many talents.
I always saw that moment though as similar to when you're watching some program and someone comes in and they just start picking at it or asking you questions. It's like, I just want to watch this. Just get out of my face. And I kind of like, in that way, it was less embarrassment and more just annoyance.
Right. Yeah. Like you don't get this. This is my thing. Kind of get out kind of thing.
Because Garak's trying to, like you say, he's trying to unpick it, isn't he? He's trying to sell, he's trying to analyse. And he's basically, it's like, he is to say, well, you're so silly, isn't it? You're ridiculous. This isn't how spies work. And Bashir's like, yeah, but you don't understand. This is my fancy. This is my performance. This is my, you don't get it, Garak, because you're from Cardassia and you have no imagination. Right? But, it's interesting how you're right in that, there is, I suppose, some level of embarrassment with it in certain ways, in certain contexts.
One of the other things I was thinking about is, we talked a little bit about Star Trek casting theatre actors, particularly casting people with that versatility. Someone like Jeffrey Combs, who's obviously very versatile. You also get in Next Generation with Brent Spiner. It's like at some point they realise, okay, Brent Spiner is the guy who can play all these, he doesn't just play Data, he can play all these other characters. So you do get episodes like A Fistful of Datas, where he plays like, 5 or 6 different characters or something. You get even the episode Masks, where he's playing all these different characters. And I suppose it made me think, one of the things about having a repertory company is that you're writing to the talents of the people that you've got. You know who your cast are, and maybe you're going to stretch them, or maybe you're going to play in something that they can do. Maybe, Avery Brooks is certainly an interesting person, as we've anyone who's seen the Captain's documentary can see he's got an eccentric side to him. Maybe when they were writing Our Man Bashir, they were thinking, actually, I can see Avery would be up for doing this. He can tap into that kind of like that slightly different, less kind of straight-laced personality.
So diplomatically putting it there.
But there is definitely that sense of like you're kind of playing to the strengths of who you've got. And in a way, it reminds me as well, aside from the kind of repertory company, going all the way back to, say, the Elizabethan theatre. Obviously we think of Patrick Stewart as a Shakespearean actor, and in the Elizabethan theatre you'd also have a company, you'd have Shakespeare there writing the latest play for that company. He knows who's in, he knows there's an old man with a grey beard, he knows there's, whatever, these kind of young romantic leads, he knows there's a fool who'll come on and like do kind of ropey stand-up or whatever, and you're kind of playing to those strengths in a way. So I suppose it's a kind of interesting question from the writer's point of view when they decide to do an episode like this, particularly say something like Far Beyond the Stars, which obviously is primarily a very powerful kind of dramatic episode, that you've got that kind of anchored very much by Avery Brooks, giving this real sort of powerhouse dramatic performance. But you've also got characters like, say, Michael Dorn in that episode, who plays this kind of quite flirty, quite charming, very laid back, very easygoing baseball player. Very much the opposite of Worf. and you kind of think, well, where did that idea come from? Is that because they know what Michael Dorn is like in real life? He probably isn't, let's hope, probably isn't like Worf, and it's that kind of like, we'll give him something a bit different to do this week. We'll give him something different to play.
And then there's also the situations sometimes in the series where people are playing different versions of themselves, of their own character at different time periods. So I'm thinking of like Picard playing an older version of himself, or a younger version of himself. I mean, there's more than one case of that, isn't there?
Or Odo. Even in Children of Time, you get the Odo that's like, whatever it is, 200 years
or the younger
older.
Odo, when he first meets Kira and he's like less sure of himself and it's his first investigation.
Yeah, and I guess you maybe like the sort of flashback things you get. I don't know. I'm never quite as convinced by that. I mean, I think that flashback episode is great, but I suppose they're only flashing back a few years. I always struggle a little bit, and I know people love this episode, and I do understand why. But First Flight in Enterprise, I think is a great episode, but there is no way that Scott Bakula looks like he's, or even seems like he's, whatever it's meant to be, like, what is it, like 10, 15, some significant period of time before, and he just seems like exactly the same guy. Do you know what I mean? There's no sense that he's a younger version of himself. And I suppose playing older is easier in a sense, because you can put on the beard, you can, do your wrinkles, you can kind of, you can kind of act an old person. In some ways, playing a younger version of yourself is harder, because it's almost like stripping away rather than adding to it. I don't know, so I'm never quite as convinced when you get these kind of like, 10 years earlier or whatever episodes. But you're right, I suppose there is the potential there to play your character slightly differently one way or another.
And I always think there's one thing that seems to be a trait in a lot of the series, until perhaps the kind of most recent ones, is there's a lot of singers as well, for better or worse. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, then we had someone like John Spiner, and then we had Avery Brooks, singer, Vic Fontaine, well, he essentially a singer before that, Jerry Ryan, and all of them get opportunities at some point or another, less so Nimoy and Shatner, to sing and perform in the show as well, and the writers can call upon that kind of trait as well.
Or Gates McFadden, who is a dancer.
A dancing doctor.
Jonathan Frakes playing his
trombone.
Is it trombone?
Yeah, I think he genuinely plays. Unlike Brent Spiner, who I don't think plays the violin, right? As far as I know. But I think you're right. Jonathan Frakes does play the trombone.
Take Me Out to the Holosuite. Don't they make Ron play left-handed, because he's actually really...
Because he's too good at baseball. Yeah. That's true, yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's another episode where people are out of their comfort zone, but they're very much playing their regular characters rather than playing someone else. But I mean, that might take us on to think of another way of looking at this, which is that even aside from getting to play a different character, Star Trek is very versatile compared to say a police procedural, or, a lot of long-running series. There's a kind of very much a format, especially an episodic series, for what the sort of shape of that episode is like, and everyone is sort of reasonably similar. Star Trek, you can have an episode like Take Me Out to the Holosuite, which is basically like a kind of sports drama. You can have an episode like The Measure of a Man, which is a courtroom drama.
Yeah, you're not really going to see that in EastEnders.
Yeah, exactly. So you can spend the whole episode in a very different type of story somehow. In a different genre. You can have like detective genre. You can have a romantic comedy. You can have for example, there's the DS9 episode. Is it Fascination? The one which is basically Midsummer Night's Dream. Very light, very silly, kind of frothy, and you can go. I mean, DS9 is probably the darkest, the most intensely dramatic of the Star Trek series. They also, I think, do the best comedy episodes, and their comedy episodes are just like a romp for 45 minutes, and then we'll get back to the story next week. And that, I suppose, if you're working on a long-running series, whether as a writer, whether as an actor, or whatever, that must, in its own way, make it less of a grind in a way, knowing that you get to do something a bit different. You get to kind of have that emotional variety in terms of what you're playing, as well as the kind of, on a more basic level, who you're playing.
I think there's a natural sort of, whether the actors know it or not, a natural theatricality to being in Star Trek anyway. Even though it's a show, obviously, which very much is visual, and it's set in space and everything like that, I still think just the way it's written, the way it's performed, the very storytelling itself, it lends itself to a very theatrical way, I think. And so I think that when they have the chance to mix it up and play these different parts, I think they learn quickly, through their craft, a very much sort of on-screen theatrical approach, and it's hard to define. I think it's different for each series, but it's unlike anything else Star Trek in that sense.
Do you know what? I think it's maybe changing as well, because obviously I was lucky enough to see What We Leave Behind a day early, and they mentioned obviously a lot of Deep Space Nine crew came from theatre backgrounds, pretty much all to a man. Next Generation, nearly all to a man as well. Original series, much and such the same. But now as we kind of get more in, theatre is becoming less predominant. A lot of these people are coming from TV shows, films. Jason Isaacs is coming from big films. Sonequa Martin Green coming from Walking Dead. There are less of them coming from perhaps that theatrical background. Enterprise, I think, was the exact same. So when maybe we see less of them actually in Enterprise and Discovery going to these sorts of places with a character, maybe they don't have the tool set, or maybe they do, it's just not been written to, but maybe it's something to ponder.
I think they'd learn more. It is, yeah, and I think they'd learn in a way, they'd become better theatre actors by being in something like Star Trek. Actually, I think they would, if they then did more theatre, I think they'd find that they've learned things in the opposite.
Green screen
way.
Nowadays. Before you had the practical effects, now it's like green screen. Right? Imagine there's an alien invasion force coming down. Whereas in theatre, it's like imagine there's an alien. The similar traits, how you learn
imagine
about it.
Imagine there's an army coming, over the hill or whatever it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's also the sort of thing to do with like prosthesis. We heard today the Discovery actors talk about the prosthesis. And I think that actually also does relate to theatre as well, because in theatre you're very much putting on a mask for people when you're acting on stage, and also like heavy makeup, and costumes and all sorts of stuff. Especially like things like, I'm thinking of Shakespeare, like Midsummer Night's Dream, the bottom, right, who wears like a donkey's head and stuff like that. And so when what's her name, Mary Chieffo talked about how she'd done theatre, sort of been trained to do sort of makeup work and mask work in drama school, that she used that when she was acting in Discovery. So I think I think in Star Trek you do have to be a very versatile actor. You're going to be required to imagine things that aren't there. You're going to be required to play completely different types of characters on a regular basis. Like you said, in the storylines, they could switch. One moment you might be in the mirror universe, one moment you might be in the holodeck, one moment you might be standing on a bridge, like looking at something mythical. You have to kind of play it realistically, otherwise the audience won't buy into it.
And in some ways, maybe that is easier if you're playing an alien character. I mean, I know there've been kind of discussions about the acting styles. There was an interview, I think, that Anthony Montgomery gave that's on the Enterprise Blu-rays, where he said that there had been this sort of edict, I think it was him that said it, that the aliens were kind of allowed to play it big, but the human characters had to kind of play everything, not quite deadpan, but like very straight down the line. There was not to be any kind of acting with a capital A, if you know what I mean. And that essentially they're being told to kind of tone it down. Obviously the alien characters, they do have like Mary Chieffo said, and Jeffrey Combs said the same thing, actually. You've looked at the script, you kind of worked out something about your character, you look in the mirror and you see, right, this is who I am. And that kind of, what he was saying was that's the point where he decides, okay, now I get who Wayun is, or now I get who Brunt is, or whatever, because I'm seeing them in front of me. And what Mary Chieffo was saying this morning was actually it was helpful to her that she looked so different from herself, because she could actually see a different person and then try to sort of embody that person and kind of be that person. That's harder, I suppose, if you're, Patrick Stewart, who doesn't ever get to have the prosthesis and stuff, but then he's got his, background in Shakespeare and weekly rep and everything to fall back on, when he's required to, I suppose like The Inner Light would be a good example of when he's required to do something very much outside of the kind of box in a way, or outside of the regular kind of remit.
I was thinking the opposite of what you were saying about that episode. We've done Mary Chieffo and having the makeup and helping her take a different role, as well, like a Voyager episode, Body and Soul, where you've got Jerry Ryan trying to imitate Ricardo, but she's got nothing to almost aid her other than having watched him for so many years. So kind of like the opposite.
And I actually think that's a very interesting episode, because I said this last night and people were shocked. I like 7 and 9 as a character. I'm not the biggest fan of the way that Jerry Ryan plays that character sometimes. But that episode I watched and I was like, wow, she's a really good actress. She's so it's obviously like, well, the thing that I'm not wild about is a choice. It's not that she can't do something else. Do you know what I mean? And you see someone do something else and you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that of them. I wasn't expecting that level of comedy, that level of kind of lightness. And you do get that. Funnily enough, I saw, I don't know if you see it so much in Next Gen, but it was a real revelation for me seeing Patrick Stewart on stage when he did his Christmas Carol, which he was doing all the time they were doing Next Gen. And I suppose because I sort of thought of him as Captain Picard, I thought of him as this very serious kind of, this kind of sort of almost sort of patriarchal, quite sort of stern character in a way. And in that Christmas Carol, yes, he plays Scrooge, and obviously Scrooge does that. There's a reason he chose that book. But he also plays all the female characters, he plays all the children, and he imbues them with this real kind of lightness and silliness and kind of something totally different. And for me, that was a real revelation, seeing him play like the absolute opposite of his comfort zone in a way. And obviously, maybe not everyone gets to go quite that far, but Star Trek can stretch actors to definitely do something that is not what you expect from them.
You've got that episode, I can't think of the title, where the crew of DS9 take on all the JCS former hosts.
Yeah. That's a good
Facets?
Facets,
yes,
yeah. Which that, like you've got Quark, I'm assuming almost like braiding or combing someone's hair, and then he and the host allows him to come out, and it's quite jarring seeing that difference between someone who's not at all like that and then goes really soft and caring.
And again, of course, we get Avery Brooks playing the really weird side
character. So there's a pattern emerging here.
Has anyone got any final thoughts before we?
I think we should leave the last word to Tony, given how
Tony's been having a nap over here, I think.
No, I'm just waiting for the chance to jump in. Jobbing actors appearing in different roles in Star Trek. Ethan Phillips appeared as the doorman when you mentioned Dixon going in and shooting up everybody.
Yeah.
So I wonder how many other actors have appeared as themselves. But then Ethan we know him as Neelix, so other actors they're not heavily made up, so...
Well, it's the advantage of having the makeup. It almost allows you to be more incognito somehow. Maybe Jeffrey Combs would never have had that career in Star Trek if he'd been...
What was this? René's Auberjois is in...
Yeah, that's true. He was in an episode of Enterprise. Yeah, you do get that kind of, not just crossover of characters, but crossover of actors, dropping them into a different role. Well, it's been fun talking about weekly rep here in Birmingham at the Destination Star Trek convention, and thank you all for joining me. We've got to head off and make a beeline for Kate Mulgrew's panel, but this is not the only thing we've been talking about on Trek FM this week, so here's a listen to some of the other things that you might have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, Standard Orbit.
It has no opposable appendages, so I'm not sure how it stole the pump. But be that as it may,
without damaging it.
Yeah, it's in perfect condition. Oh yeah, here it is back. No acid burns on it. Yeah, it's fine. Just like you unscrewed it from the thing, really carefully. And anyway, because this is a good episode, we're gonna let that go. If this was a bad episode, we'd be like, this is so stupid.
Earl Grey.
I have a feeling we talked about Echo Papa 607, didn't we?
We didn't talk about it we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording on the role-playing one. Right?
Oh, that's right.
That's what you were thinking of.
Okay.
Little secret thing our listeners didn't hear.
All right. Right.
Because you had your camera drone that was showing us the dice rolls that you had, and you called it Echo Papa 607.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
I know. You do these things and you're like, did we record that? Did listeners hear that?
I was like, I remember that. I was like, I don't remember. I was like, was it a character? No.
Nope.
Literary Treks.
So this, of course, leads to a whole bunch of weird temporal shenanigans and paradoxes and that sort of thing as they figure out what they have to do to change history so that it doesn't turn out like it does in the alternate future in Book 2, but at the same time not changing their past history so that they're not destroyed with the rest of the universe. And oh my god, I've gone cross-eyed.
Warp 5.
They've determined that they have to get to the Guardian of the Galaxy. Guardian of Forever. Oh my goodness.
We could work in the Guardians of the Galaxy.
It could work.
That would just be crazy. They have to work in the Guardian of Forever because somehow the Guardian of Forever is actually was created by the temporal Cold War people.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favourite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published.
And please leave us a star rating and a written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place is to join the larger conversation on the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type in Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up.
If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Primitive Culture. That'll come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM.
Primitive Culture is brought to you by Duncan Barrett and Clara Cook. You can find Duncan Barrett on Twitter at Barrett's Books. You can find Clara on Twitter at ClaraJeanMC.
If you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details.
Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more, available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us, and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our associate producers here at Primitive Culture, Tony Black and Amy Nelson. Tony was one of the founders of this show, and we still keep him in the loop about what we're doing. You can find him on Twitter at @AJBlackWriter, and online hosting about a dozen other podcasts on everything from The X-Files to classic cinema. Amy is the host of 2 shows on the Trek FM network, Earl Grey and The Edge, and you can find her online on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson.
You're blended all right.